Juliet was born on the 1st of November 1929 in a nursing home in Pont Walby on the outskirts of Gleneath. She was the second but only surviving daughter of W.M. and Gladys. Her first school was the Gleneath Primary School. At the age of 11, she went to Dunbarton House School in Swansea. However, one morning during the war, she arrived at the school to find that it had been bombed by the Luftwaffe during the night and had been completely destroyed. She was then transferred to Neath Grammar School for girls. Her maternal grandfather was John Powell, landlord of the Butcher's Arms, who sported a bushy moustache akin to that of Lord Kitchener. As a child, Juliet couldn't say Grandpa, so he got a new nickname, Ganker. After a further 6 months studying in Cardiff, a time which she hated, she went to work in Swansea as a bookkeeper and would also run the stores back in Gleneath when W.M. and Gladys went on holiday. Juliet then went to London to study at Secretarial College at the London School of Secretaries in Queensgate. David was born on the 25th of January 1930, while the Nicholas family were still living in Tregaron, Mid Wales. He was the first child of Daniel and Bernice. He went to the Tregaron Church School before the family were transferred to Gleneath.
Dad needed to go down to the bank on a Sunday morning because there was something that needed his attention down there. So he decided he'd take David with him in the pushchair and pushed him down to the bank, did whatever he had to do, and then locked up and made the bank secure. But when he got home to Auntie Bernice, there was a question of where's David? And it was at that stage that Dan realised he'd left David in the bank vault.
The Nicholas family were moved to Gleneath, where they rented the house at No. 1 Rock Street. David attended Neath Grammar School after sitting the entrance exam 2 years earlier than normal and was successful in getting a scholarship.
And so I went then to what was then called Neath County School. It wasn't called Grammar School. It later became Neath Grammar School, but in those days it was called County School. And I started there in 1940. And I remember the very first day, I went there, school uniform, hat, cap and all that stuff. And the alarm went, there was an air raid, because where we were was about 2 miles from a huge oil refinery, what was then known as the Llandarcy Oil Works, where later Mama worked for a while as a secretary. And the place was bombed, and we spent the whole of my first day in the cellars, in the pitch dark, under the school.
His report for the summer term 1944 was very good, with most of the examination results being very pleasing. David and Juliet first met at the Gleneath Golf Club when they were just 8 years old. Even when they were still at school, they were both considered an item. They would even catch the school bus together, and after school would go down to the local cinema and walk up and down the Banwin Road together. From Neath Grammar School, David went straight to Aberystwyth University to study English. It was clear to everyone, even then, that he knew what he wanted to do when he left, and that was to be a journalist. David had been an army cadet while in school and was called up to do his national service in 1951. On a trip to France shortly after the war, they went to see an international rugby match in Paris, and David was encouraged to shinny up the goalposts. That's him on the crossbar. After a brief period at officer training camp, he was assigned to the Royal Army Education Corps. After making sergeant at the end of 2 years' service, he was returned to Civvy Street. With the bells of Ystrefallta Church pealing, William Morgan Davis walked his daughter, Juliet Powell Davis, down the aisle 60 years ago.
Auntie Maisie and my grandmother and grandfather, John Powell and Annie, they didn't go to any of their children's weddings. And they weren't going to come to my wedding, and I said, I'm not getting married if you're not coming to my wedding. You've got to come to my wedding. And they came to my wedding, and it was the only one they came to. Don't ask me why. They did very, very odd things. But they did come to my wedding, because I loved them. And
was that Ganka?
yeah, Ganka Brahma. Yeah.
And what, Auntie Vi, did she go?
Yes, she was there. And Auntie Doris and Doreen and Ninian and John. All family were there.
The wedding was a small affair, as David was still doing his national service and they were still rationing. As was custom on the way to the church, children placed ropes across the road and WM had to hand them each a penny to pass. Windsor was the best man, while the bride wore a little French Juliet cap, a veil and open shoes.
Very expensive. This was 60 years ago, 60 years ago. And it was nice. It was lace. Very nice dress it was. And after I wore it white, cream it was, cream to dances when he was in the army. And then I had it dyed black. And it went on for a long time. It was lovely, it was expensive.
How much was it?
It was about 80 quid, which 65 years ago, it would be about 1,000 quid now.
The men wore white heather in their buttonhole, and the church was decorated in white hyacinth from the valley. There were no bridesmaids. They signed the registry in the neighbouring church hall.
My going away outfit was a green velvet coat, you must have seen it, with a little feathered hat, a long umbrella, cream gloves. Very, very posh.
And the honeymoon consisted of one night in the Strand Palace Hotel in London, on their way back to Beverley in Yorkshire. The newlyweds were then just 22 years old and had just 12 quid in the bank.